Name's Karthik and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Karthik.
Um, so I I appreciate the intro. That's one of the blessings of the program that you get to be surrounded by such wonderful people and to become like a wonderful person yourself if you don't feel that you are right now. Um, so the topic that I have chosen for this meeting is acceptance. So if you zone out like right now, if you're anything like me and just like then just remember acceptance is the topic. Um, I think for me, a lot of what this program has had to be was about how to live life without alcohol. When I came to AA, I definitely saw that drinking was a problem, and I knew like I'd invented the first step on my own. Whereas, like, okay, like obviously, I don't have any power of choice in drinking, um, but I didn't quite I wasn't able to do anything about it, right? Because I was just hung up on like all of these other things. So, sometimes people say that they say that term problem drinker. I've always hated that term because it doesn't like tell me enough like about anything. Like anything in life, they're like, oh, problem drinking is continuing to drink despite negative consequences. And that to me, like that's not a useful definition. Like everything has negative consequences, right? Like if you look hard enough. Even owning a bunch of books has negative consequences. Like when I moved to South Carolina in December, now I have to lug like all of these like bookcases worth of books. That's like 600 pounds of books. It's a pain. Does that mean I'm addicted to books? No. Does that mean it's a problem? No. And so, like for me, like when people said that they're a problem drinker, I'm like, you just have no resolve. You have like no stomach or ability to self-sacrifice. Like when I came to AA, the point I'm getting at is that I needed to replace it with something else. Like for me, like I one of the things I drank for was acceptance. I drank to like chill out, to like get a serenity that was not inside of me already. And I drank to put that inside of me so that I could chill out and just like be a normal person. It was a vent, and like I've heard my therapist like even say this not only about myself but about other people. Like when addiction comes, it usually comes as a friend. And it that was definitely true for me. I sometimes even said that I was a solution drinker. I drank because I wanted a solution. So in the 12 steps of AA, I have found another solution. Um, if you don't have a big book, you should get one. They're pretty cool, and I think like PDFs online are also free. Um, so there's a story in the back of the big book called Acceptance Was the Answer on page 417. And this passage goes, and acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment.
All right, sure.
Nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and in my attitudes. Um, so, like we have the serenity prayer where they say, the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I, for the most part, had the courage to change the things that I could when I was, even like when I was like out there drinking, like we as alcoholics are a very industrious people, to put it, politely. We're very sometimes even conniving or scheming or, shooting angles and like all of this stuff. But it's like I wasn't shy of like taking the effort to like put in to get stuff done. And like yeah, like sometimes it's like yeah, the problem is that I'm like way too like wasted to like show up somewhere and like do the thing that I'm supposed to do. But it wasn't a lack of courage that was holding me back in that situation. Like in AA, I've learned a lot about how to not be like meddling in shit that I don't have control over. Um, If you haven't heard the phrase hula hoop, which is like if you like put a hula hoop around your waist, like you can only control stuff inside that hula hoop. That's what I have control over today. Like all these like person, places, things, and situations that are happening around me. Those are things that are, for the most part, like out of my control. Um, and I think sometimes like an inconvenient or a hard to like put into an AA platitude truth is that you have like partial control over a lot of situations, but not necessarily like control over the outcome. So for me, like that acceptance looks like disconnecting from like the outcome, and it means like putting in the work. Like I can go to work and like be the best employee that Karthik can be. And that's something that is in my control. What is outside of my control is like who my boss decides gets the promotion, right? What is outside of my control is like whether or not my coworkers are putting in more effort than I am. You know what I mean? Like like I can go in and like, try hard and all that stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome is going to like go my way. Um, you know, One of my sponsors, especially when I was early in the program, used to say like you have Santa Claus for God. And like what he meant by that is like, like I had like this idea, which, of course, like to be blunt, like a lot of like rehabs kind of like push this idea on you, like, oh, like you'll have like all the things that you want in life happen if you just stay sober, if you just like put in and do the work, and like all these things will magically change, you'll get the girl, the car, the job, the money, the house, the car, whatever, all that surface level stuff. And that's not really like what the program is. The program has promises, but all of those promises are spiritual promises. Like you will have like the serenity to accept the things you cannot change. You will have, like your host of friends, blah blah blah, like all that stuff that they talk about. But they don't really like promise like that you're gonna, like get money and like be drifting a Lambo like downtown. Even though that's what I heard like when I first came to the program. So like one of the things that I had to like adjust even like in recovery is the idea that the Santa Claus got idea where it's like, oh well, if I'm just a good boy, if I just like stay sober and like keep a crack pipe out of my mouth for a year and blah blah blah, then like obviously I have to be rich. Otherwise, AA is like falling short of its promises to me. And it's like, well, no, that's like not really the case. Like, like when they say like fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. They mean fear of the people will leave you, not necessarily that people will come, and fear of economic insecurity will leave you, not necessarily that economic insecurity will leave you. Um, and like that's the biggest switcheroo I thought in the history of switcheroos. When I found that out, because when I first read that sentence, I thought like fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. I'm like, oh, fear of people will leave us is obviously like 1930s, like they couldn't be direct. So that means like, like women will like see my confidence and like flock to me. And economic insecurity will leave us means that I will have that Lambo and I will be drifting in the Walmart parking lot and the police can't do shit because I'm blowing zeros. And like that's like what I thought was up. And it is not, apparently. It just means that I'll be comfortable in my own skin and that I'll be like serene and know that God will provide for me what I need, but not necessarily what I want. Um, so, there's that was kind of a letdown, I'm not gonna lie. But like life goes on, and so, like other things that need to be accepted, like I think like we have these some like slogans in AA that are like oversimplifications that are very helpful when you're new. So for example, like one of these is like you have no control over like other people and their reactions to you. And like I absolutely needed to hear that when I was new because I was just so obsessed with like my own like codependent like personality traits. I was like, okay, I gotta like make sure that everyone thinks positively of me. I gotta make sure that everyone likes me. I gotta, like do all this nonsense. And It was only like when I truly let go of that that I could focus on, instead of like trying to like people please, I could focus on ethics instead of trying to like worry about like what other people's like perceptions of me were and my reputation. I could focus on doing the right thing. And then, like lo and behold, like my reputation takes care of itself when I'm doing the next right thing. Um, so, like as you go through and try to figure out the wisdom to know the difference, you will see something similar to like what I associate with the 11th step. I think this is technically the 10th step in the book, starting on page 86. Um, at the bottom of the page, it says, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. So, what I think it's saying there is that, like when you're like doing like your 10th step, your 11th step, what that's about is kind of like honing your instincts. It's about like, like go out there and do things. You're probably not going to do it perfectly, and especially if you're new, you're probably going to have some pretty serious messes up. And the point is to learn from that and move forward. Um, one of the other slogans that I kind of needed to hear when I was new in AA was, your mind is a dangerous place, don't go there alone. And like that was helpful at first when because I was like, thinking about like my next drink or drug, or my how I'm going to like make amends to all the drug dealers that I owe money to or whatever, in the form of like paying them and hanging out with them and showing there's no hard feelings, and how could that end badly. Luckily I didn't do these things, because I had sponsors advise me not to do that stuff. So, um like what I learned like after that, it kind of like it says there, it's like, you're not going to be inspired at all times. Like when you're new in the program, you're going to like make some mistakes. You're going to overstep like what you thought was in your control. You're going to sometimes understep it, and you'll fail to do something that you could have or should have done. So that process of like figuring out like what is in your control, it's a learning process, and like any learning process, you're not going to be good like the first time you do it. Um, for us alcoholics, myself especially, I've found like we have high standards in a lot of ways. It's like when I start on something, like I want to start at pretty good overall and like become like ultra skilled like in no time. It's like when I pick up the guitar, I want to like start off at like Eric Clapton skill level and then be like rounding like Jimi Hendrix skill level by like 1 year in. And that these are not practical or like reasonable goals to have for yourself. But like that's how I approach things in general. It's like the first time I do something, like I want to be good at it. And for us alcoholics, like that's, well, for anyone, like you're not going to be, no one is good at anything. Like Jimi Hendrix was like playing guitar for like 20 years before he like even like recorded anything. But like in general, it's like, like there's effort, you have to like hone your skills. And the ability to like be in the moment, to take responsibility for things you might, for when you mess up, like it talks about in step 10, and to like have that conscious contact with God. You may pay for that with absurd actions and ideas, but you'll eventually get better at it and you'll come to rely upon it. But that only comes with, like taking a shot at it. So today, like my life is drastically different from what it used to be like. And like I go to work and make medium stakes decisions, with sometimes little supervision, and it's people trust in like my judgment and all that stuff. But Like I work in a specialized field where it's like I don't think I've met um anyone well, no, I met one person in AA who works in the same field as me and would understand like what I do for a living, but by and large, like most people wouldn't. So, just because of like the specialized education and training and certifications and stuff. So, yeah, and that's not to like flex, but that's like to like illustrate the point that like you will be in situations where it's like your sponsor can't like give you the step by step or the play by play. Like you're gonna have to take responsibility for your own actions. You're gonna have to like do some thinking on your own. There will be times that you aren't near a cell phone. There will be times the network's down, your battery's dead or whatever, and you'll need to know how to make the right decision for yourself by yourself. So, like that is also part of the acceptance process where it's like, um, like especially like when I was like around like 6 months to a year sober, I remember it was kind of freeing to be like, oh well, if I mess up, I just did what my sponsors told me to do. That's on them. That's not my fault. You can't blame me. But then, it's like it gets to a point where it's like, okay, like if I wanted to stay in there, it would also mean that I kind of have to give up a lot of my dreams on life, if I wanted to only ever face problems with answers that like anyone in AA could answer, like that's gonna hold you back. So, like my suggestion is, if you've got a little bit of time under your belt, and you're like working with a sponsor, like move towards that uncomfort ability, that get out of your comfort zone and, try to be honest with yourself and take accurate self-appraisals on things to learn more about like how you could grow as a person. Um, and then in terms of like accepting other people, like you have Sick Man's Prayer on page 67, as well as the one on 552. Those are also good ones on how to accept other people for how they are, as well as situations. So, anyway, that's what I have for the topic. So, if anyone wants to talk about acceptance of persons, places, things, or situations, go for it. And thanks for having me.